Okay, awesome.
Okay, am I good to go?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead, Harish.
Awesome. Thank you so much to the Codeless Conduct team for the opportunity. This is always a really fun workshop and sort of group to be part of because of
Yeah,
the
no.
unique focus for this particular type of hackathon. Typically, our focus is on developers and on using our tools to pull on-chain data. But there is also ways where non-developers can still participate, still be able to use some of the tools, be able to analyze blockchain data. And I'm really glad that Codeless Conduct sort of focuses in on that particular user group and looking at things other than just simply building a traditional application, for example, using code. So thanks again. What I'm going to do is just spend a little bit of time talking about data in the context of how we at Covalent sort of see some of the challenges and how we sort of position our particular tool in the marketplace. We'll then dive into the Covalent API reference, so you can actually see how you use tools like ours. And I've got a couple exercises towards the end, so you can again see where you would use our API versus a whole plethora of different tools that exist out there. I realized I didn't even introduce myself properly. So my name is Harish. I look after developer relations at Covalent. You can find me on Twitter at Harish_YBR. And that QR code is to the website if you want to learn a little bit more about what Covalent is. So really quickly, I want to get just a high level overview of data trends in this space that we call Web3 and some of the challenges. We'll talk a little bit about what is Covalent. Some of you may be familiar if you've participated in prior Codeless Conduct hackathons. And then we'll spend a little bit of time just understanding, how to access on-chain data, and then we'll sort of wrap it up by talking about some of our resources. And I do want to keep it, relatively casual. It's a small group here, so feel free to jump in with questions if I say anything that maybe needs a little bit of context or definition. Don't hesitate to jump in and ask your question. So at Covalent, we like to do this thought experiment where we say, okay, projecting out 5 years, and we started doing this in 2020 when the team finally started to grow, and taking a look at what the blockchain space looks like, and in particular how it what the implications are for data. And so, everything from having key pieces of information on public blockchains around, potentially your credentials, having sort of this digital ID, to this concept of, single-use and multi-use blockchains. So we're starting to see that trend now with this idea of app chains. So big ecosystems like Polygon and Avalanche have all announced that they're basically creating the tooling so that for your particular project or application, you can have your own dedicated blockchain, and all of the security elements, the cryptography, all of that is supported by the primary chain. But as an application, you get your own dedicated chain. And so powering, and running on these blockchains will be, hundreds of different applications, both, having an element of centralization and decentralization, having an impact on what we do, and sort of seeing this migration where, a lot of people a lot of users will be on chain, and many may not even realize that the application that they're using has data being stored on chain. So all of this kind of presents a pretty interesting challenge where the underlying data that is being stored on primarily these public blockchains, it can be quite difficult and cumbersome to actually query this data. Sometimes you have to write a lot of database code or SQL code to be able to query this information, because you do have some interfaces and some standards, but for example, with NFT metadata, there isn't necessarily a standard for what that format looks like, and so it's not surprising to see that sometimes you get inconsistent data. Sometimes there's things missing, and all of that just adds to frustration and challenges as a consumer of this data to be able to use it effectively. And then whether you decide you're going to run your own sort of indexing and query nodes or your own infrastructure or using third-party services, in general, it can be quite expensive to access this data, even though technically you can use some of the public tools and pull this data for free. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's not necessarily an effective way of grabbing on-chain data. So in saying all this, from our perspective, there is this need in the marketplace for having a unified data solution. So regardless of which blockchain you're pulling data from, so having native multi-chain support, not needing to worry about running your own infrastructure and hardware and having to absorb those costs, but having that done for you, and then having sort of this pretty broad and comprehensive data set that allows you to build applications for a whole variety of different use cases, including many that we don't know yet. This is the problem that we see in the marketplace and where Covalent sort of fits in as a data middleware solution. So that's effectively what Covalent is, a consistent solution to access all your on-chain data through a unified API. It's queryable from the cloud, so you don't actually need to download or run any local infrastructure. We say that you don't need any code, and now it is an API, so there is some element of being able to incorporate API calls in some sort of coding context. But as we'll sort of see with the demo, you can actually use our in-browser API reference and just take data and put it into a spreadsheet and then be able to do your analysis there. So the opportunities that opens up is being able to use traditional analysis tools that you might be comfortable, whether it's Microsoft Excel or if it's Google Sheets or even Tableau or Power BI or some of these other business intelligence tools. And as mentioned, natively being multi-chain, so being able to access data across I think something almost like 35 different blockchains that we now support with the same sort of request response type of structure. And we've definitely been growing like crazy over the past few years, and now sort of seeing over 27,000 devs and 3,000 projects currently active and continuing to build with our API. So you can go to covalenthq.com/platform, and that's where you would sign up to get an API key. It's completely free to use. And just to talk a little bit about what you can do with this and how it works, we actually run full archive nodes for each of the blockchains that we support. So what that means is that we have the full extent of the data from the Genesis block, having every transaction, having every log event stored and available in our database. Sorry, was there a question? Somebody had taken their mic off mute here. I'll just continue. If there's a question, feel free to jump in. And the way we organize our API is in sort of these three categories. We call them the Class A, Class B, and coming soon is these Class C endpoints. And the reason we've got it structured like this is Class A is applicable across every single blockchain you support, and it's exactly the same setup for each of the different endpoints that fall under that classification. So if you want to get balances for a wallet address, if you want to get the NFT data for a wallet address, if you want to get transactions, regardless of which blockchain you're actually using, the request and response approach for every single one of those blockchains that has Class A support is exactly the same. So if you're an analyst or a developer, what this means is you can just focus on the end deliverable of what you want to do with the data, as opposed to the data wrangling and trying to, write the right queries to be able to fetch this data. We take care of that for you. The Class B are more protocol specific. So, looking at some of the examples that we highlight here, we only have a handful of these because we saw very quickly that it's difficult to scale if you're trying to write these protocol specific endpoints. And where that's leading us to now is enabling tooling that allows anybody who may be familiar with SQL to actually write their own custom API endpoint, and then have other people sort of use it. And for those who build these endpoints, they get rewarded for doing so. So the tooling for that is actually coming out in this third quarter, and we're pretty excited to see the opportunities that it provides for both the spectrum of endpoints that will be available, so that anybody can get the data that they want, but also incentivizing and rewarding people who build these endpoints. People ask me, what can you actually do with this data? And so this is just a quick snapshot, looking at what are some of the common use cases, and there's probably a whole host that are also still to be determined here. But if you're looking to, build an element of, Web3 into your gaming, or to do, DeFi taxes, or analyzing membership of a DAO and seeing what tokens are being held by members and how they vote, all of that you can actually do with on-chain data, and you can actually pull all of that using the Covalent API. As mentioned, we kind of have these two user groups when we talk about our user base. So we've got the analysts, and they're not necessarily developers. They're kind of looking at it from the perspective of using on-chain data inside of a business intelligence tool. And then, of course, we have developers. So our focus in just this conversation here is going to be primarily around this sort of analyst mode, if you will. And you'll see in the upcoming reference here where we talk about the analyst mode. I'll just pause here. Any questions? Okay so far?
So I have questions on using it and implementing it, but I'm not sure if this is the best time to do that.
Okay. Yeah, let's run through the rest of the content I've got, and then I think I'll address exactly your point there. Okay, let's take a look at the API and go through some examples. So, as mentioned, if you go to covalenthq.com/platform, you can sign up for your free API key there. And then there's sort of two primary resources here that you can then go to: the API reference and our knowledge base. The API reference is basically a place where you can see all the endpoints that you have access to and actually be able to make calls directly from the browser. The knowledge base is sort of our repository of tutorials and guides and all sorts of other learning content that you can leverage if you want to do a bit more of a deep dive to learn about the tools that we offer. So we're going to use the API reference here. And right off the bat, I'm going to sort of point out up at the top here these global settings that you can configure. So what we see is people like to focus in on a particular chain. So you can go here and select any one of our supported blockchains, both a suite of mainnet and testnets. You can set your currency if there's a particular one here that you'd like to keep things focused on. And then here's where I mentioned the developer mode and the analyst mode. And by setting analyst mode, what this will do is automatically format the response data from the APIs into tabular CSV format that you can then, with just one click, export and open it up into Excel or Google Sheets or whatever your business intelligence tool might be. So I'm just going to set that to be the analyst mode. Here were the breakdown, the Class A, the Class B, and then we've also got a pricing endpoint here if you want to get historical token prices. And let's just take a look at a couple examples here. So Class A, again, these are the ones that are applicable across every single blockchain that we support, and the request response formats are exactly the same. Really, all you're changing is this idea of an identifier for the network, which we call the chain ID. So let's say I wanted to get balances, all the token balances for a particular address. I can actually just run this example request here, or I can actually customize it and make a call to a specific address that I want to fetch some data from. And so you can actually do this directly in the browser, and you can see that by setting our mode to the analyst mode, you actually get the response here in a spreadsheet. And I can actually just click on Sheets here, and we'll have this particular response open up in a Google Sheet. And then I can do my analysis here. So pretty handy, especially for analysts, to be able to have that type of one click to open it up in Excel or Google Sheets, or you can just export it as a CSV and upload it into your preferred BI tool. So this is an example of being able to get token balances for any particular address. You can get token holders. You can get the transfer information. So every time a token is exchanged between two wallets, you can get that detail as well. We then have our NFT suite of endpoints, and these are also being improved on constantly. So being able to get all the token IDs for a particular NFT contract, to getting the external metadata for a particular contract and token ID. So if you've got a collection like Bored Apes, you can get all the metadata associated with that collection through this particular endpoint. We've got transactions, and then we've also got sort of what we classify as our base. So these are log events, topic hashes. Again, these might be getting into the weeds, especially for the level that you guys might be experimenting in this space at. But for those of you who want to dive deep, every time you have sort of this this concept of a smart contract that powers Web3 applications, they all generate different log events, and you can actually query those log events using our API endpoint. And then Class B, this was highlighted being sort of protocol specific. We've just what we've done so far is sort of bucket all these into this idea of x, y equals k, which stands for it's the equation that governs these automated market makers like Uniswap. And so there's actually a suite of, I think, 8 or 9 different endpoints. And so if you want to get all the pools for a particular decentralized exchange, or you want to get the tokens or the transactions, you can actually do all of that through these suite of endpoints. And we actually have a full list of different DEXs, as we call them, that we support. So you can actually quickly get all those details for Uniswap, SushiSwap, PancakeSwap, etc., from this particular endpoint. So, have a look around. Again, by being able to do this in analyst mode, you can quickly export this data into a spreadsheet and be able to do your analysis there. Let's take a look at, I think the next thing I wanted to talk about here is, okay, so let's take a look at some concrete examples of where a tool like our API would come into play to help you answer some questions. So let's say the first question is, for Covalent, we've got a token called CQT. How many CQT token holders are there currently? So how would the audience here, how would you actually go trying to answer this question right now would be sort of the approach that you would take. Does anybody want to comment on what they would do? So if I were you, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But I don't know if I think somebody else wants to speak. I think not. So okay, yeah. I will try to look for the contract address of the token, and then maybe paste that into the how do you call it? It wasn't developer mode. It was
the analyst mode.
Analyst mode. Yeah. And paste in one of the, I think, class A endpoints. Yeah,
So
that's how far I think I could get.
yep. So we've got an endpoint here called token holders as of any
Oh, great.
block height. And I would just make this a custom request, and I can pass in, as you said there, Nate, I can pass in the contract address right here. Now, if you were just starting, you would just go to a tool like Etherscan, and I would simply just search for CQT, and I can actually get that information directly off Etherscan. I can see here the number of token holders is 6,205, and I can actually go to the holders tab, and I can see, at least a list of this. Now, I can, download this in a CSV format. I can, scroll through this, but it gives me a snapshot as of right now, how many token holders there are. If I want to get any historical data, this is when I start running the challenges by some of these easily accessible and free tools like Etherscan to be able to do any sort of analysis around like historical trends around token holders. And so let's take a look at how you might do that with our API. So first thing, let's just do a sanity check. We see that there's 6,205 holders here shown on Etherscan. I'm going to copy this contract address here, and I am just going to go into where Nate was saying and paste that here. And I can just set this to be just the latest. So with respect to a particular block height, I can just get the latest information. And I'm just going to set this to be a really large number. By default, we return 100 results with a request if you don't specify a page size. So I'm just going to make that some large number here and let that run. 6,000 plus token holders. This shouldn't take too long. And then once this is run, I'm just going to open this up in Google Sheets and be able to do my quick analysis there. So again, this is a very common endpoint that we see people use where they just want to be able to look at the token holders of a particular ERC20 token, and then they start getting into doing a little bit more involved analysis. So if I just hover over this, I see the count 6,206 minus the top row, so 6,205. So quick sanity check, this matches what we see on Etherscan. Okay, so this was obviously a little bit harder to do with our API, but let's go to the next question here. How many CQT token holders were there on January 1st, 2022 at midnight UTC? So once you start asking these types of questions, you'll find really quickly that you run into challenges using something like Etherscan. And that's where some of the flexibility with the query parameters that you have available to you with our API allow you to do this type of analysis quite quickly. We actually have, now the first question is, well, what block was generated, the closest to January 1st, 2022? We actually have an endpoint for that. So if you want to get the block heights between, 2 points in time, we can actually just set this, let's say this was 2021, December 31st at 23:59, just say 00, and then I can set this to be 2022, 01, 01, and then this would be, say, 30 or something like that. I can actually then quickly get the block height for the first block that was generated on January 1st, 2022. This, as simple as it sounds, it's actually not that easy to do if you use something like Etherscan and some of these other tools. So it is something that people have asked us about and why we built this. So I see this is the block number 139.16166. And so now I can go back to this token holders here. Let me just make a quick note of this. 139.16166. And so what I would do is go back to the token holders, and I would set this to the block height there. And if I run this, now I will actually get the historical data for all the CQT token holders as of this particular block height. And then, once you do that, you can actually start to do some comparisons and see the difference in token holders. You can actually also look at the difference in the number of tokens held at different snapshots in time and see if a community and the token holders are growing or shrinking. All of that becomes quite easily accessible to you. So here we see that there were 5,720 holders as of January 1st. And so, something like 500 plus or 500 different token holders since that point. So that's a very simple example, but kind of shows you what you can do with our API. And then you can start asking even more complicated questions like what is the difference in the amount of CQT held by all token holders since the start of the year? And very similarly, you could use the exact same endpoints to get the difference in the number of tokens held by all the token holders. Okay, so let's talk about some of the resources that you have available to you. So we talked a little bit about the API reference. This is super helpful. You can try everything in the browser, export it directly into Google Sheets and do your analysis there. If you go to covalenthq.com/docs, which again is linked to from the platform page here, this is what we call our knowledge base. So you can see examples of all our supported networks and details on each one. You can see, for example, our FAQs about what you can do and how many queries can I make, and if there's any issues, where do I go? And then we also have a little showcase here for projects built primarily at hackathons using our API. So you can kind of get a sense of what people are building and what some of them have actually gone on to raise money and become larger projects, which is really cool to see. But we have details on all of that on the knowledge base here. And then the third resource is if you actually scan this QR code here, so github.com, Covalent HQ, Web3 resources. And this is a starter sort of resource that we've begun to create if you are new to the Web3 space. So if this is helpful, please do star it. We'd love to get that feedback. There's a couple templates that you can start experimenting with. So if you want to build a very simple, Chrome extension for tracking crypto prices, the code for that's all ready for you there. You can just download the little bits and customize it the way you like. For those of you who might be developers, there's things like React components that we have built that make it super simple for you to incorporate things like wallet tables and dashboards into your application. And then we've started to build these sort of code alongs. These are done in sort of these Jupyter notebooks where you can just run lines of code and have a lot of context around, what it is that you're looking at, kind of like a digital notebook, essentially. So we built one here on, why JSON RPC doesn't scale for Web3. And you can actually go ahead, create your wallet. You can actually even create your own token just by running the lines of code provided for you here. So a few resources for beginners to check out. And with that, I think we're a little bit over time, but happy to pause there and see if anyone's got any questions before we wrap up. Anyone got any questions?
Can you unmic anyone that has a question? Can you unmic?
I'm curious about the business model. You mentioned a token because all this information is free to use. You just ask for an API key, and that's it, right? You don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, very very good question. So here's basically how the business model is structured, and I sort of say this because we're kind of pivoting to a slightly different business model. So right now, the blockchains we index actually pay us to index their data, and the reason they do that is they want to nurture their respective ecosystems of developers and analysts so that they have access to this data as easily as possible. So that's kind of what we've done to bootstrap the product as it is. Where we're shifting to now is having these tiered plans for those who may have more custom needs with respect to the data that they need to use, or have everything from higher rate limits to dedicated services or performance guarantees that they'd like from us. So while there'll always be a free tier for developers to analysts to use, there are also going to be these paid tiers for enterprises and some of these larger projects paying us to use the API at a higher service level. So that's where we're sort of moving to this particular quarter, and we've already got customers lined up there. But for a developer and analyst starting out, there will always be a free tier that you have access to.
Great. And what's the role of the token, Covalent token?
Yeah, great question. So you can actually stake it. So we have the Covalent network, which is the sort of the decentralized network providing sort of data tracking and provenance. So in terms of the process that we're going through to completely decentralize your infrastructure, the first is the step of creating these things called block specimens, which is kind of like a proof of the data extraction process, and having that proof stored on a blockchain in sort of a mutable format. Where we're going from there is the query process, the storage process, all of that's going to be decentralized with the validators. So right now, you can actually buy CQT and you can stake it in the network with these validators who are performing these tasks. So it's the staking element there. And then it's also a governance token. And when people start consuming data directly from these validators, they'll be buying or sort of prepaying for their data requirements using a stable coin. And then behind the scenes, we actually will use that to buy CQT, which is then rewarded to the validators sort of completing the requests. So that's where this is going to end up in terms of what CQT is doing behind the scenes. But for now, primarily governance and staking is the role of the token.
Thanks.
Awesome. Any other questions? Anyone have any ideas of what they're planning to build and where they might see something like Covalent API helping them out? Well, if I'm sure there are, but if you don't want to bring them up here, that's no problem. Happy to chat over Discord or Twitter. Feel free to message me directly. Happy to help you out with any sort of ideation or even troubleshooting any things that you might come across when using our API. But again, for the folks at Codeless Conduct, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Harish. Thank you for the support every time. Wow. Has been a very, very insightful talk. I've learned a lot. I can't wait to watch this video again and try out. Okay, on that note, would like to appreciate everyone that is still hanging in here. You're the real MVPs. Like, we've had about 5 talks straight in a row. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Harish. Do we have any comments? Because